Okay, hello everyone. So we'll get started. I can see a few new faces so just to remind you of the structure of this 1 hour class. So I'll talk for about 10 minutes, sometimes a bit less, about some aspect of the practice or something connected with the practice. And then we'll meditate, and I usually lead about halfway through that and then let you do the rest on your own. And then there's a few minutes at the end to for anybody who'd like to say something of what you noticed or experienced in the practice. Okay, so I thought I'd say a few words about what I'm calling eruptions. So things that sort of erupt into our lives unexpectedly. Might be a health issue. It might be something, a big life event like moving house, or even a rupture in a temporary or permanent rupture in a relationship. So those are the kinds of things, and that the mind can react to quite strongly. Um, and in relation to awareness, it's quite easy for the mind to almost automatically think, "Oh, this is it's too big. It's too big to be aware of," and we revert to um, maybe the habits of being anxious or just responding to the drama in some kind of way or another. And that I think with the thinking, oh, it's too big, I can't be aware of this. It's helpful to remind ourselves that in terms of bandwidth, with us thinking we don't have the emotional bandwidth, but it just takes a tiny bit of energy to be aware. Really, we're just noticing what's happening rather than having to bring something else to it. So just worth looking at what happens in times of stress, busyness, uncertainty, what happens and what can we learn? That's really what we're about, is what we can learn through being aware. Because what I've described there, they're ordinary life events. Millions and millions of people in the world are going through them each day, and we have our personal ways of being with them. So I wanted to say something of my own recent experience. I've had a series of life experiences. Started with a couple of symptoms, breathlessness, fatigue, and had a conversation with the doctor, made an appointment to go to the hospital, have a blood test, those sorts of things. So I initiated these things. I didn't even realize it, but I felt in control of the process. But quite a few things that followed on from that, which is okay, by the way, isn't anything particularly serious. But I everything that followed in the last couple of months, I suppose, has not been initiated by me, but by me sort of responding or reacting to what's been initiated by medical staff. Um, Assessments, phone calls, examinations, even down to what I eat and what I drink have sort of been um, suggested or just told, that you need to do this. So the process just very much not being directed by me. Um, it's happened quite fast, so there's been a sense of a whirlwind going on, and that's increased the sense of things not quite being in my control. And so I just had a few observations of going through some kind of process like this, which, as I say, happens to millions of people around the world. If they're lucky enough to have an NHS, actually. Um, because it's the second noble truth, isn't it? When something happens in the body, it's not something that's gone wrong in a sense. It's life living itself out. And I think awareness, being aware of that process with that perspective, can really help, can really be a friend to us. So the lack of control was the first thing that really struck me. Like I said, this whirlwind and a process not driven or initiated by me, that I was sort of um, suddenly I was being phoned up and strongly suggested to do a lot of different things by people I'd never met before about my body, my body. Uh, so subjectively, it was a bit like someone had sort of strapped roller skates onto me and was sort of pushing me around. And I just had to go where these hands at my back sort of pushed me along. So I think it really undermines that sense of being in control, which usually we have. What my choices were, what I normally did, what I wanted to do with my time, all those things were sort of affected by this. Even down to there being a list of things for a few days, a list of things that I could eat on one side of a piece of paper, and a list of things on the other side of the paper that I could not eat. And actually, it was really funny because the list of things that I could not eat was usually exactly what I ate, down to fruit and vegetables and beans. Um, so someone else sort of dictating my life in that way. I'm not used to that. I'm not used to being so sort of governed, I suppose, and reaching into all these different aspects of my life. So it's quite discombobulating, this being pushed along. And just kind of allowing that to happen, that release of control, because I knew it was for my benefit. But it was just psychologically, spiritually, it felt quite unusual. Uh, I think part of this lack of control was a sense of sort of indignities being done to my body, and I'm not going to go into detail, but I will mention one thing, which was at some point being sort of strapped into a plastic mouth guard, which was put in my mouth and then strapped around my neck. So it felt like, I don't know, it felt like something completely alien had just been sort of attached to my face. Um, and yeah, what the other thing that I particularly remember, actually, it's not so much to do with, well, it is to do with lack of control because I needed to do it, but just having to sort of drink this really, really disgusting liquid in quite large quantities. Um, and actually, how that was really interesting from the perspective of awareness was just noticing that every time I mostly to myself was saying, "This is disgusting. This is absolutely disgusting. This is half aspartame and 50% salt. This is basically what this is." But that the way that I talk to myself and occasionally to other people reinforced that sense of dislike. It reinforced the sense of aversion and made the whole experience so much worse. So it was really the awareness of that helped me reframe to some extent how I talked about that experience. And I could see the disliking and the reactivity go down in relation to how I verbalized internally or externally what was happening. Along with the lack of control was the need to hold uncertainty. Um, we know that life is uncertain, um, but various issues, including health issues, I think really bring that to the fore. Future plans just got thrown up and were suddenly provisional. And I've got this time out from in-person teaching this year, so I've got a couple. Well, I've got one particularly big plan. And it was like, well, just maybe that's provisional for now. I just don't know if that will be possible. And I had a couple of mantras which I think were really helpful. One of them was, "This is not in my control." Just really reinforcing that message, not in my control. And that was very helpful. And the other was just one step at a time. When the mind sort of threatened to sort of run on, as to both with future plans, but also with what might be going on in my body that I wasn't aware of. One step, just take one step at a time. Um, just do the next thing. And that was the most helpful thing in terms of being present, just staying present with what was happening. Um, and the last thing I'll mention that I really noticed, I've been working quite strongly with patience and impatience in the last couple of years. But I really noticed, some of the telephone conversations I had to make, I couldn't always get through, so I'd be hanging on the end, um, trying to call back someone who'd called me about an appointment and couldn't get through. So the mind starts sort of ruminating around, oh, I'm wasting time. I've got my own agenda. I want to be writing my book, and here I am just hanging on the end of the phone. So just that sense of doing what needs to be done. This is the priority right now. Having to put aside my own important agenda and just do what was necessary in the moment. Um, so all this was very interesting. And actually, I think when we take practice to be about whatever arises and whatever happens, and the emphasis is on how the mind is in relation to that and how the mind is um, reacting and really being willing to be with that and notice that, then practice remains very interesting. And it helps how we relate to those things that are supposedly happening to us or around us. They're they're not insignificant. They are important, but watching the mind remains more important. Okay, so I said a little bit more then. I've gone spoken for a bit more time than I intended, but that's it for now. So if you'd like to set yourselves up to practice.